Hello and welcome to the MGA webinar, Cybersecurity for Smart Automated Factories. We have presenters today that are experts in this space, and we're looking forward to hearing from them shortly. The Manufacturing Growth Alliance is a membership-based organization that supports second-stage manufacturers. We help them grow and prosper by supporting them, shore up their internal operations, and then look for external opportunities for growth. In this journey to support second stage manufacturers, we partner with many organizations to bring educational content and resources to support small manufacturers. Today's conversation, Cybersecurity for Smart Automated Factories, was developed out of a need that MGA has been hearing with small manufacturers in their need to protect these new technologies that they're bringing into their facilities. Our partner, Microvisions Incorporated, is going to share with you today key insights into this topic. We have with us presenting Julie Lowe, who's the president of Microvisions, and Ben Knighton, who is an account executive. And I'm going to turn it over to the two of you to get us started.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. Happy fall. We really appreciate you having us today and are excited to share some knowledge on this topic. After all, it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. The joke around our office is it's only recognized once a year, but should be celebrated every day. Because every business wants to keep their data and their people secure. So speaking of people, a big thank you to everyone that has joined us this morning. We really appreciate you taking the time to hear what we have to say. I am positive you will learn something new and helpful on cybersecurity and smart factories and Industry 4.0 because it is important for manufacturers to be aware of it and understand. So let's get into it. If you go to the next slide, please, Jen. This is a quick one. Yeah, so as I'm sure you are all aware of by now, the purpose of us hanging out today is to give you a better understanding of what Industry 4.0 is and how to secure your manufacturing environment in the latest industrial revolution. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's take a brief trip down manufacturing memory lane here for a couple of minutes, because it's always important to look at where things were in the past to really have a better understanding of where things are headed and why and what the significance of that is. So the history of manufacturing can really be broken down so far into 4 industrial revolutions: Industry 1.0, which was the start of it all, and then Industry 4.0, where manufacturing is currently. So each time there is a new industrial revolution, it's represented by a significant innovation. It may be in technology or in operations or processes that revolutionize the industry. So the very first time that happened was when the steam engine was invented. Steam engine, that was the technology that really started it all, started the first industrial revolution. And then after that, Ford invented the assembly line, and then mass production became possible. That was the second revolution. And then the third and fourth revolution are really the most significant to you all joining us today, because the manufacturing is currently in a transitionary period between the third and the fourth industrial revolution, meaning the innovation that caused Industry 4.0 has already taken place, and it's being embraced by manufacturers currently. But there are still a vast amount of manufacturers that are in the process of adopting and really still operating mainly within Industry 4.0 technologies and processes. Maybe they are aware of Industry 4.0, but the adoption hasn't really happened yet. So Industry 3.0 began with the automation of manufacturing processes. So taking a machine that used to be mechanical and automating it. For example, taking a machine which before a human maybe would turn the handle to operate it. Now the machine has a small, little, fairly simple computer. It's called a PLC that can talk to sensors on the input and give commands on the output. So for example, it would talk to like thermocouples that measure temperature and then give a command based on that information, or it would talk to contactors that turn motors on and off. PLCs, they really became widely adopted in the 1980s, and they've been around ever since and have been collecting data since. And then the manufacturing industry realized, oh my goodness, we're sitting on a gold mine. The gold is this data. We have all this data that gives insights into so much of what's going on the shop floor, and nobody's doing, and in the office, and nobody's doing anything with that information, with that data. And that's how Industry 4.0 came about. So if Industry 3.0 was the automation of manufacturing at the factory floor level, Industry 4.0 is the automation of business processes. It's about automating the entire business process of a manufacturer, the entire stack of workflow operations. So everything involved from raw materials coming into the front door to finished goods going out the back door. It's all about taking that data that's being collected by your machines and your equipment and turning it into business information. Information, from data to information, that is used to make strategic business decisions, and then doing all of that automatically. Next slide, Jen. Okay, and so on that last slide, I made an important distinction between data and information. I find this pretty cool. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just a nerd about, I think I'm a nerd about words and their meanings, but it's important to make this distinction when talking about manufacturing and how it's evolved, because there is a significant difference in the meaning of those two words. I won't get too deep into the weeds on the slide because I think it sort of explains itself fairly well. But when we talk about data, data is nothing more than a thing that happened and when it happened. So it's a point in time that is documented that tells you those two things. Something happened and it happened at this time. Now, if you take that data, you analyze it, you analyze those data points, you start identifying trends and patterns, then you create information from that data. Information is something we can act on, right? We can see a trend in the data and say, hey, maybe we should take this action at this time because the trend is telling us that something is happening. A great example of this is your car dashboard, right? You've got all these gauges. You've got one that shows battery info. You have one that shows your level of gas. You've got one that your check engine light, whether that's on or off. So all of those things are pieces of data that you use to determine one piece of information, which is my car running like it's supposed to? Are we good? Yes or no? If yes, great, I'm going to keep driving. If no, pull over, maybe time to call the mechanic. You get your hands dirty. But you know, that's a good way to think about it. Information is created from data. All right, next slide.
All right, so IT, like many other industries, has its own language, and it's often full of acronyms. So we're going to define some of the terms to ensure we all have a common understanding. So malware is a malicious software that a hacker has developed and attempts to either get you to download the program without your knowledge, or they hack into your system with credentials that they found on the dark web, and they've installed this software. Ransomware is a really popular form of malware. And what it does is it encrypts your data and then holds it for ransom. You've probably heard about it in the news, the Columbia pipeline. Some of our local corporations have had issues. It's really common. I heard this morning that last year alone, there was $400 million, I believe, in ransom. So the IoT, Internet of Things, is all kinds of connected devices, such as cameras, like the Amazon Echo, Google Home, smart TVs, thermostats, light switches, Ring doorbell, appliances, cars, wearables like your iWatch, Fitbits. And then there's the industrial Internet of Things, IIoT, which consists of PLCs, as Ben mentioned earlier, different instruments, human-machine interfaces, IP cameras, sensors, things that allow remote access and monitoring, data collection, data exchange, and analysis to improve productivity and efficiency. Artificial intelligence, AI, is the science and engineering of making intelligent machines, especially intelligent computer programs, essentially combining computer science and robust data sets to enable problem solving. It's machine learning, programming the machine to learn and write its own code. Then you've probably heard of AR, augmented reality, virtual reality, VR. Blend those two together, you get MR, mixed reality. You might have even heard of extended reality, XR, which is kind of the umbrella term for all of those things. Basically, it's taking the human to PC screen interface, modifies it either by immersing you in the virtual environment or adds to or augments the user's surroundings, or it does a little bit of both. And we'll be talking about some examples shortly. And then information technology, IT, and operational technology, OT. I think probably most of us think of information technology, IT, which is the office and administrative systems, including some processing of the information in the factory. But the operational technology really is control of the entire manufacturing process. Next slide.
Okay, so as Julie mentioned briefly above, when you think about smart devices or devices that can connect to a network of other devices and technology, there are two types of smart devices that are really relative to you all as workers in the manufacturing industry. So there's IoT devices, which you will most likely see in the office, as Julie said, and then IIoT devices, which you will most likely see on the shop floor. So both of these types of devices exist to create convenience and efficiencies through smart learning. They exist to make our lives easier by using data, turning it into information, and then oftentimes acting on that information. IoT devices, Internet of Things devices, are mostly consumer-based devices, like Julie mentioned, Google Home and Amazon Alexa, you know, some advanced security systems, things like that. You know, something that learns on its own through data collection and makes suggestions or takes action for convenience. They're literally like refrigerators that are IoT devices that can order you more milk to be delivered to your house once you run out. It's pretty crazy, the capabilities that exist. And the reason I bring IoT devices up is that it's important for you to be aware of them and understand what they are as someone involved in a business, because they become a vulnerability. So if somebody brings an IoT device into your office and it connects to the network, it becomes a vulnerability. Because it can connect to the internet, they become a potential doorway into your system for a hacker. So we refer to these devices as shadow IoT devices, which are devices that are inconspicuously connected to the internet, fairly hard to detect, and can be a real threat if not properly managed. A good example of a shadow IoT device is from a recent security breach that happened to a casino in Vegas. The casino, it had a big fish tank, and it had a thermometer, a smart thermometer that was connected to the internet, regulating temperature, and it wasn't properly secured. The hackers found it. They got in that way and caused a bunch of trouble. So it's pretty wild the creative ways hackers get in. You know, and they got in that way, and yeah, it's very interesting. So, you know, you don't want to be that casino, basically, is the point of all this. So what is a little more relevant to manufacturing directly are IIoT devices, or industrial Internet of Things devices. These are specific to industrial applications. So they're used by machines and production equipment and production facilities. A good example is like a smart sensor that monitors your machine and can predict when a part usually breaks. And then it can schedule the repair time proactively before that break happens. So going back to the whole idea of Industry 4.0 and automating decisions, you're automating that business decision of scheduling the repair time for the machine based on that data collected by the machine, and then that information and the information that data represents. And you know, you're increasing efficiency, you're reducing downtime, you're streamlining that whole business process. And that's obviously just one example. There are so many IIoT devices that provide optimization in so many other realms of manufacturing, like supply chain management. There's real-time machine monitoring, production visibility, system integration. And in each one of those cases, the technology connected to a network is connected to a network, collecting data and it's turning that into information. And yeah, some pretty cool technologies out there. Next slide.
So we'll talk about IT and OT convergence. While historically information technology and operational technology were independent functions, Industry 4.0 really requires the convergence of the two to achieve advancements, such as you want to reap the big benefits of big data, or gaining information for better decisions, optimizing business processes, minimizing sudden machine failures, reducing operational costs, lowering risk, and shorten project times. Now, the challenge is that it may not be an easy task, and it's really a mind shift of the enterprise architecture when you think about the two groups. I think first you need to understand the goals, the strategy, and the vision of the company. And then both departments need to work together in cooperation to architect the solutions. Those solutions need to consider the threats and the business interruptions, especially as they pertain to securing the environment and maintaining compliance. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about some of the trends in 2021. Number one, with 16%, is growing AI adoption. The data scientists create algorithms that can make decisions and learn, so to speak. So these programs can make real-time decisions to control a manufacturing process, automate assembly robots, transport parts, move products to be shipped, track a shipment, call for maintenance, monitor security, detect infrastructure or equipment intrusion or tampering. And then following behind that at 13% is human augmentation and extended reality. You know, the example of being able to train people on machines through virtual reality, having augmented reality with step-by-step instructions. So you take a 360 degree of the plant floor, and then you can have step-by-step instructions that people can see through their virtual or augmented reality glasses, just creating simulated trainings. Really cool stuff. And then, of course, with all these devices, network and connectivity for for example, greater wireless connectivity options with 5G. When you have all these devices that are communicating on the network, you really need ways to move more amounts of data or capacity. We need performance. If we're communicating at machine speeds, we've got to be able to have that bandwidth to talk quickly. We need accessibility, access wherever we are. So if you think about, you know, a garden hose and the amount of water that goes through that versus a fire hose or even a bigger pipe, the IoT and IIoT devices, which are typically wireless, need that pipe. So there's great network technology available to accomplish that. And then at 10%, Internet of Everything, real-time connecting of machines to machines, humans to machines, humans to humans, IIoT, Internet of Skills, Internet of Services, Internet of Systems, Internet of Everything. And all of that is really crucial frameworks for the smooth implementation of Industry 4.0 facilities. And then advanced robotics, automation becomes especially important today when manufacturers can't find people, or they can't find people who are reliable, or if the jobs are very dangerous, or there's a need to eliminate contamination. And then big data and analytics. It's great to have all of this data generated, but it's not of very much value if you can't capture it or store it or analyze it quickly and cost effectively. Next slide. All right, so I put a slide up with various industries and some of the automation that they're experiencing. But I did recently attend the Manufacturing Leadership Summit, which was held in September. And the speakers just had some really great use cases that I wanted to share. So AI Foley, it uses artificial intelligence with a smartphone's camera. The app helps blind people navigate and identify objects. So you could put your camera on an object and it will actually speak what that is. So a blind person can see that there's a stairway coming up or it will identify clothing on the rack. Just a really neat application. And then there's a company called Zipline, and they use autonomous aircraft delivery for hard to reach places. So if they need to deliver things like blood or drugs, that autonomous aircraft can fly over, drop a package with a parachute, and then the people can retrieve it. Icon, 3D home printing, very big 3D printer that could actually build a home. Iron Ox does vertical farming. They use robotics and artificial intelligence to ensure each individual plant receives just the optimal levels of sunshine and water and nutrients. And then Tubbs is a robot that moves carts in hospitals, so nurses can really do those tasks that are high value. And then the automotive industry, if you think of Tesla, they're just the example, because they didn't have all of the legacy plants. They could start from scratch and really implement Industry 4.0 from the ground up. So huge advantage for them. And if you look at their cars, they don't really become obsolete because they continue to download improvements. They download the software, the firmware. So they're always being updated. So it's something to think about with your products, is how do you make them live longer? And then smart cities, having sensors on trash cans, so they know when they need to be picked up rather than traveling from spot to spot, not knowing if there's a full trash can or something that doesn't need to be picked up. So just really great examples that get you thinking about, how can I do something like that? How can I either invent or use what I have or change the way of thinking? Great, cool ideas. So next slide.
Okay, so now, as with most things in life, great things that improve our lives, they're usually not 100% amazing, right? They're usually not completely free of challenges. Right now, manufacturing is in a pretty amazing shift towards these technologies, and Industry 4.0 is producing incredible possibilities in the industry. And as things progress, it's going to be important for manufacturers to start thinking about and adopting these technologies and really experiencing the benefits that they provide in order to be competitive. The efficiencies, the productivity, the automation of strategic decisions, all of this, it's amazing, right? But you also have to understand the risks that come along with these technologies, especially from a business perspective. But first, so let's highlight some of the opportunities of adopting Industry 4.0 technologies. And the first one, really to put it simply, it just helps your business run smoother, right? This technology decreases disruption. When you have predictive maintenance and automated machine monitoring that can schedule downtime and provide data on the health and the performance of the machines, that's going to help your operations run smoother. And then more efficiency. These technologies enable you to make better use of your resources, right? Have less waste. Automating the business process itself, making those strategic business decisions in real time, not every quarter, because you have that information at the fingertips that enable you to do so. And then innovation. Every manufacturer shares one same goal, and that's how can we bring our raw materials, right, or sub-assemblies through the front door and push finished goods out the back door? How can we do that faster and better? How can we do that with less waste, for less money? And now, as Julie mentioned with Tesla, it's starting to think about how can we make our products improve after they go out that back door also. That's something else to consider as technologies evolve and the marketplace evolves. But I mean, all these technologies provide the opportunities for all these things to be possible. But again, the opportunities never come without risks. So let's talk about some of these risks. You know, how will it affect my company culture? What kind of financial risks are involved? What kind of security risks are involved? So when you think about company culture, adopting and utilizing new technology is a huge shift in how manufacturers have operated for a long time, right? They're used to these legacy machines, legacy processes, and the culture shift for that has to happen for this technology to be adopted and utilized to its full potential. Really, it takes time, it takes resources and training, and there's perspective shifts that need to happen. So there's a lot of risk in pushback of the adoption of this new way of doing things by your people, your business's people, and your organization internally. You know, which is why a lot of times a successful plan for implementation of these technologies usually is driven by a trusted advocate or a small team of representatives internally that's responsible for helping transition people into the new ways of doing things. It's people with great relationships with people that are working directly with this technology on the factory floor. And then there's a financial investment that you need to consider. Anytime you invest financially into new technology, there's a risk, right? Especially the most important thing is making sure that you put the appropriate plans and resources into place to manage that technology properly. Make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into. If you make the decision to invest in a new technology and then you skip an IoT devices, right? And then you skip the vital step of securing those devices, in this case, in the case of IoT devices, then your risk of experiencing a security incident skyrockets, honestly. And if you get hacked, the remediation in a lot of cases will cost you more than the investment in the technology itself. You know, as I'm sure you are all aware of, due to the circumstances in the workforce and the labor shortage that manufacturers have really been struggling with the past year and a half, feels like almost 2 years. At some point, when you're thinking about the investment you're making financially, and as wages continue to increase and the reliability of workers continues to decrease, when you think about the financial investment and trying to find good work, you're going to hit a break-even point at some point where it may start to make sense to invest in some of this technology because it's costing you so much to acquire and keep good workers. So maybe let's invest in some of the technology that replaces our need for workers in jobs that are very unfavorable and that you're having a hard time finding work for anyways. And then maybe taking people that you do find to work, training them in new areas that aren't as dangerous, that don't, you know, where technology, you don't have technology for that work. Yeah, you need the human in those cases. And then, as I mentioned above, there are the human risks, right? Because these devices the security risks. These devices connect to your network. Because they connect to your network, they are innately a security vulnerability to your business, if not properly secured and managed, right? Just like that smart fish tank thermometer in the casino, or just like a computer on your network that isn't up to date with security patches and updates. You know, it has outdated antivirus. Just like that computer is a potential gateway for real criminals to get into your network, IoT devices that aren't properly managed are a vulnerability and a risk. So as we move forward, Julie will talk, you know, more about you know, what you should be doing from a security and management perspective for these devices, for this technology, so that you can decrease your risk of getting hacked as much as possible, because all of the savings and efficiency really can go out the window with one attack, and you can spend everything you saved and more with this new technology and the efficiency it creates, you know, along with a bunch of other indirect consequences. So we don't want that to happen. Next slide.
So securing the operational technology, a factory, how is it different? So a lot of internal IT team members and managed services providers are really focused in the IT or information technology world, and not necessarily in the operational technology world. They may be on top of what needs to be done traditionally to protect their systems and data, although with these increased risks and compliance requirements that we've seen, it's really added a new dimension even to that. but they may not be thinking about the security requirements for IIoT devices or other technology on the factory floor. And often it seems like IT is not involved with the operational technology decisions. As we mentioned, it's really important to think about how to converge these two departments, because that is key in Industry 4.0. And then as the nefarious actors look to expand their profits, they're targeting the non-traditional devices in the operational technology arena. It may be a means to be getting into the information technology systems. So when you consider securing IoT and like devices, the operational maturity level for many of those new manufacturers is pretty low. The devices may not have been designed with security in mind, or if they provide patches and updates, they don't really have a good delivery system or an implementation process may not be very streamlined or automated. So, and often emerging technology normally means that there's been less testing, less exposure to the market, and that does increase the likelihood of vulnerabilities. So how do hackers get in? Ben mentioned in the Las Vegas casino, there was a thermometer in the fish tank. That's one way hackers got in there. There was a water treatment system in Florida. They were using a common remote control program, but they didn't put in good password policies. The hackers were actually able to get in and change the amount of lye in the water to dangerous levels. It just so happened, one of the people was watching the screen and noticed people were moving, it was moving, things were happening, and they were able to stop it. And fortunately, it was caught before it did get into the water supply and cause an issue. Another scenario is a food and beverage company. There were unknown hackers that changed the recipe for a beverage. They increased the quantity of salt about 3 times what it should have been. And it really went undetected until customers started complaining about it. So how does this happen? The IIoT devices may not be secured behind a firewall, or they may not be segmented from the rest of the network. So often outdated and non-supported operating systems such as Windows XP or Windows 7 or even Windows 2000 are still running attached to machines. So it may be to replace that machine, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's very hard for a lot of companies to justify doing an upgrade just so that operating system can be upgraded. The developer of the IIoT device may use an unpatched version of Linux. They might not do a lot of firmware updates. They may be infrequent, or maybe they don't do them at all. These devices are often used as botnets to attack others. So even though it might not be intention to take down your network, they may be using those controllers to perform denial of service attacks on other networks. So instead of monitoring temperature or other processes, they're actually supporting criminals in attacking other systems. I also mentioned they're used to get to the corporate network. The IIoT devices are often reverse engineered so that hackers can find the security flaws and exploit them. Sometimes the device manager is hacked and the firmware is actually compromised, and the manufacturer ships out the compromised firmware on the device. They don't even know it. And then IIoT management software can be compromised. So they take over the devices from compromising the management software. And in the past, there haven't been a lot of security standards developed for IIoT like there have been in the business world. But there is hope. We are seeing more emphasis being placed on security. We're seeing more offerings out there. So while it's a little bit behind, people are paying attention to it. So next slide. And then how do we decrease risk? So we did a webinar in April for MGA really concerned about security in the office environment. So I would highly encourage that you take a look at that, because you want to follow all of those best practices. And then it's really important to involve your IT support team.
Sorry.
Whether they're internal.
Real quick, Julie. Jen, I'm sorry. One more slide. I think we're on the wrong slide. Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Jen. Sorry.
Okay, so involving your IT support team, whether they're internal or external or both, during your device selection and installation. Your IT team is going to ask questions about the supplier's cybersecurity process and testing. They're going to want to understand how best to configure the devices to ensure they're secure. Often there's default passwords that are never changed. Hackers know what they are. So that's a really important reason to involve your IT team. And then, they need to determine how to obtain the firmware upgrades and hopefully test them before deploying them. Sometimes you want to be cautious of automatic updates so that they don't mess something up, because it would be pretty dangerous to have a machine go awry. And then I would advise that you create an inventory of all of the IoT and IIoT devices on your network, so you have a complete picture of where your risk exposure is, and then sit down and develop a security plan. Contact the manufacturers if you've got existing devices deployed, and make sure that you know how to secure them, you know what the vulnerabilities are. And then isolating the IoT devices by segmenting them into separate virtual networks with the right switches. It's a very easy process to do, and it makes sure that if there's an attack, it's not jumping from one thing to another. And then you really need to take a philosophy of zero trust. Put in zero trust policies. So never trust, always verify. You need to give the least privilege access needed to get the job done. Things like restricting connectivity to only certain IP addresses, to certain locations, to certain hours of operation. Hackers love to do things during the hours that nobody's there. That way nobody notices it. And then encryption from the point the data is generated to where it's transmitted. Putting security on the devices themselves. In a lot of cases, that's not under your control, but when you're evaluating devices, asking the question is, do they use encryption? Really important, and I think we're seeing more and more vendors that are offering that. So next slide. A couple of resources that we wanted to share. As I mentioned, I attended the Manufacturing Leadership Summit. I believe it's a yearly event. It was a lot of really good information and ideas. That was in September. We also found that the right place is providing some Industry 4.0 opportunity assessments. So you may want to give them a call so they can help you understand what your opportunities might be. And we've got the contact information on the slide. Next slide. So are there any questions?
I am going to show my video here. Okay, well, thank you so much for all that content. I kept on marking off my list of questions from manufacturers that have been engaged with MGA over the past few months, specifically on Industry 4.0 and cyber questions. But I do still have a few questions that I want to make sure that we cover for our audience. And that one question relates to customer needs. What are you seeing as it relates to the customers of manufacturers and manufacturers needing to secure their facilities? Is it a demand that customers are now requesting for manufacturers? Could you talk a little bit about what you're seeing from a customer perspective?
Yeah, I would, number one, read your contracts very carefully. What we are seeing is that your customers are writing cybersecurity requirements right in your contracts. So that could be anything from, you know, regular scans of your network, or multi-factor authentication, or you know, training your people on phishing schemes and things like that. And there may be some things on liability and insurance requirements at all as well. So like making sure you do have cyber insurance. So yes, we are seeing a lot more requirements like that.
Thank you so much for that. At the end of your presentation, you identified a resource for manufacturers, so thank you for providing that. So manufacturers, they don't know what they don't know. Cybersecurity continues to be in the news. We know manufacturers are advancing with Industry 4.0 technologies. So how does Microvisions, I'll toss the question out to you, if manufacturers just don't know what they don't know, how can Microvisions support a manufacturer? Do you come in and do an initial assessment? Is it a conversation at first? Could you walk me through and the manufacturers through how they can leverage your services?
Yeah, so essentially we just need to set up an introductory meeting to understand, you know, what you're looking for. We'll ask a lot of questions of what are you doing today? What kind of security prevention measures do you have in place? That might lead to what we call an IT risk assessment, where we'll do a formal risk assessment, which will cover everything from, do you have policies in place? Do you have the right policies in place? All the way to, you know, what security you have implemented. And then we'll provide a lot of recommendations and roadmaps. So basically that would be the ways we would probably start. Or if you just wanted to tackle, you knew you wanted to implement something like multi-factor authentication, or you know, any other aspect of security, we could talk about very specific things with you as well.
And Ben, you talked a little bit about the risks for small manufacturers if they don't engage with understanding their cyber risk, with the new technologies in their facility, or just cybersecurity in general, with the use of even computers and laptops. I've heard the answer to this, but I'd love for you to share. Is it just a matter of time before a manufacturer or a small business is attacked, or is this something that a manufacturer can just push down the road? You know, it's a nice to have. Maybe I'll do it next year, the year before. Could you talk a little bit about the sense of urgency for manufacturers now to be engaged with making this a priority?
Yeah, you know, unfortunately, we're at a place now where it's really not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I mean, and being an IT company, being front facing to this type of thing on a daily basis, we're obviously very exposed to it, because that's our job. But I mean, we are hearing, even on the news, even not working for an IT company, just being a civilian, you're hearing of cases, you know, extremely frequently. And a lot of times you're hearing about the big companies, you know, I'm not going to name names, but the larger corporations that we all know that have gotten hacked. So it makes small businesses think that they're a little bit safer, because maybe they don't have enough juice to squeeze for the hackers to squeeze, right? But the reality is that's just not the case. Small businesses are being targeted specifically, and I think the hacker strategy is quantity over quality, and they understand that a lot of smaller businesses maybe don't have the resources to put towards a proper security plan for their IT. And so their efforts are becoming very successful to hack into these businesses, because businesses sometimes think that they're okay. They think they're too small, or they think their data is not important. You know, I'll leave it with this. It's not how valuable is your data to a hacker. It's how valuable is your data to your business. How long can you go if all of your data is encrypted? You can't access anything. You can't access client information. You can't bill. You can't do any of that. How long is your business able to sustain that way? Because that's the real question, because that's what's happening. You're getting ransomware. A hacker encrypts all of your data, and they say, okay, give us this much money or to get your data back, or you're not getting your back. And if you don't have proper backups to restore, then you're out of luck. So it's very important. It's very important. Yeah. Julie, anything to add?
Yeah, and sometimes it's not just your data is encrypted, but they actually have a copy, and they're going to threaten to expose it on the dark web. And you know, as a small business owner myself, there's tons of money you could spend on security, but it's really understanding what are the top tools you should implement versus what is the risk that you're willing to take on. And I think when you look at the risk you're willing to take on, to have a plan if something does happen, how are you going to respond? What are you going to do? Because when it happens in the moment, you're not thinking about that. So, you know, there's things you can do without spending a ton of money to make sure you at least stop some of the gaps and you're aware of and willing to take on the risk.
Well, thank you both again, Julie and Ben, for the content. This is going to continue to be a critical need for our small manufacturers in Michigan as they adopt Industry 4.0 technologies. And so we really appreciate your partnership with MGA and you being available to share your knowledge and resources to small manufacturers.
We really appreciate the opportunity, and if our contact information is on the last slide, but check out our website at microvisionswithaninc.com, or give us a call at 616-776-0400.
Thank you, Jen. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you all who watched today.